I'm working on the Kuhlau Sonatina, Opus 55, number 1. One of my students is studying it, and I've taken this view because I want you to see at times how I use my wrist. Now, there are some pitfalls that occur when you have this type of sonatina that has lots of repeated chords in the left hand and repeated notes also in the right hand and repeated intervals in the right hand, little chords and little harmonic intervals like thirds and so forth. That you make sure if you have repeated notes or chords or parts of chords, thirds, fourths, fifths, whatever, that you don't play the second one the same as the first one. Otherwise you're going to sound like a robot when you play. And I'll give you an example, even just in the first phrase, how skewing down the second of a repeated chord, the second of the same chord, skewing it down a little makes it more musical. And I'm going to show you where that occurs. I'm going to do the first phrase. Measure 3 and 4. I would start maybe more firmly. Now here, less, rolling to the. You can see what I did, as I said I was going to do when I had repeated notes, especially when I have pairs of them. The second one is going to be less. Now that makes the phrase much better in terms of the musicality of the interpretation of what you want to do. Same with here, where he does this. What I do is I fade it down because I just want to sort of skew it down. It's the end of the phrase and it's going to be what's called the semi-cadence, which is up in the air. It's up in the air, although it does introduce, we think it's a semi-cadence because we think it's going to go back to C major, but he doesn't. He keeps it as the new tonic of G major, but that's okay. It's still sort of like a halfway point there. And so I taper it a little bit down. And then that leads into the scale, comes right out of it. Now this is interesting. How do you conjoin the cadence there to the next phrase? Are you going to have like a dry spot, or are you going to think horizontally across? Are you going to have a little bit of a apostrophe, so to speak? A little kind of lift up before you go into the next phrase? That's something to experiment with. Now the way I do it, I come out of I know it's something new, and I dip under that second D. Remember I had a D on top here, which was this one, which was a little less. Now this one's going to go into a legato D across to a scale. So I don't want the listener to think like I have a hiccup there. I want them to know that, yes, this is finishing, but it's part of the same breath that's leading to that. So that the music is going horizontal no matter what here. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Sense of timing, too, that you have that. You know this D is finishing one idea, but then it's starting, introducing into this, rolling into there. So you have to be able to breathe that across without, exciting the listener that you have a pokey first D. Obviously not, because he wants a little swell. You have to start less. This is already less here, and this is coming in off that. Now this is an interesting line. The left hand should be harmonic. So every measure has a new harmony. We're in G major now, by the way. It's a dominant 7 of G major. It's a second inversion without the F sharp. The F sharp's up here. And then we come to the tonic of G major. Then we have the dominant. And then we have the tonic. It's good to know that. Now dominance, you're leaning more toward, and then you're resolving. The big word is resolving to the tonic. Whenever you're, and so what he has here is a little swell across the F sharps that are repeating upstairs. Don't play them the same, or you are going to sound robotic. Bum, 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 bum. You're a singer when you play this line. Really, I did a lot of different things with those repeated notes. I sort of pushed them down a little, and then I went forward to the tonic G, and the second G I played less, and then I rolled around to that. So I had a plan for what I was going to do in terms of all those F sharps. I sing it, and I know how I want to play it, by the way I sing it. And you could also block the left hand while you phrase that right hand, just to get a sense of the harmonic underpinning, that it isn't going to jump out, but it's going to cushion the treble. And that's going to be important, so you get this. Resolve less. That makes a nice line. And I would do a little flutter pedaling here, because it will warm it up a little bit. Not on the scale, of course, but when I get to this beautiful dolce theme. Remember, that must be way down, way down. Make sure you don't hear those jumping out the left hand broken chords. They are just harmony. And that's something where you have a heavier arm sometimes here, and your arms are lighter for your broken chord harmony. Then he goes into sequence here, right? Coming out of that after this destination note. These are beautiful sequences, and they're coming down, going up by a skip and stepping, going up by a skip and stepping by step. You want to think of them, at least I do, in groups of wavy fours, and I say wavy groups of four. So you get this, and you can use your wrist for this. Your wrist. That makes it so nice, but you don't want it the same dynamic. You've got to the top of this sort of coming down sequence that's happening. You want to make sure the top one is more and each one is coming down. And that's an arm weight adjustment that is into your hands. Arm weight delivery to your hands, and of course your fingers are part of your hands. But I always think of the hands, not the fingers, because I think of groups of notes when I play, not single finger notes, you know. You're not finger tapping this, you're rolling groups of notes. Another important mental prompt is roll groups of notes. So when you get to this, bigger, rolling motion. You can see this. Wanted you to see how I do that in terms of my wrist motions, rolling motions. Then he has another scale. Now again, when you have this quarter note, you have to breathe across from that G to the octave below G. That's going to start a scale. This G is going to be less, because you have to do another crescendo to there, dominant of G major, resolve. Then answer that. And I think you could see what I did there. It was, here again you have lots of repetitious little segments, little fragments. You don't want to do them the same. This first one is an RF. Now these chords, I'm not doing that. They're underneath. And even though I'm doing an MF to that cadence there, with that arpeggio, I don't want that to jump over my melody in this. It's definitely the whole movement does not want the left hand jumping out at all. So you see what I'm doing there. Now the next part, he ends up in G major, firmly in G major, but he's been in G major with the F sharp all along here. In fact, as you know, he got to G major when he did this. Connect less. And I'm using my flutter pedal there because it makes it warmer, doesn't it? Like Mozart. It's very Mozartian kind. Okay, so now after we come to this new section, this is the B section coming, he's going to keep that G major chord, but it's going to serve now as a dominant of C minor. So in other words, he's going to take the G major cadence here that he ended up with. We think we're in G major, but he's going to add a seventh in the next section and pull us over to C minor. It's very beautiful. It's the parallel minor of the key. So it's a little bit more, there's a little bit more emotion and depth to the emotion when you go into the minor, right? So you want to convey that. And this is dolce. Now here I would do some blocking while I was playing the melody, again to keep that taper down that left hand, not to have it jumping out, and really listen to how you're shaping the right hand. Here it goes. almost to the, finally gets to that C minor. Right? In the beginning we think of, we're not in C minor yet. Here we are, officially in C minor. Then he goes to the 6th chord of C minor, which is an A flat chord, which is a beautiful harmonic transition. Going from tonic to the 6th chord is very emotional. See how beautiful that is. And I think I would lighten that. Even though he has forte going across, I wouldn't smack that E flat because it's part of the 6th chord. It's part of coming out of this to, it's beautiful. Don't let yourself hammer that first. Now once you go into it softly, then go deeper and then make the diminuendo that he wants. Just like I'm doing it. See, I had to make the diminuendo. Now he's back to echo. So beautiful. You can see what he did. He did the dominant of C minor and then he did an echo of the same dominant to the tonic C minor. See the beautiful little echo there. That was so beautiful. And now after he comes out of that, that's the dominant, and we've been in C minor. Now he's going to bring us back to C major because he's canceling out the E flat, he's canceling out the B flat, and he's canceling out the A. We're going to be now pure C major. Now going from C minor to C major is not a big deal. They share the same dominant, but the difference is they go to a different tonic. And then you can either go dominant in C major or you can go dominant in C minor. Going into C major now from the minor. So let's see let's do the echo. No, it's all C major. Now you want to make sure that scale is coming down in C major, is rolling across and has some contour because it's a diminuendo. But you don't want it to sound robotic, and don't poke your fingers. Drag your fingers through the honey. I lifted the arm weight off right about here. It's more arm weight. Now this little bridge here is going to D minor. D minor. It's so beautiful. This is like a development section. In the sonata allegro form, and this is sonatina, you could say sonatina allegro form, when you're in the B section, you develop what was in the first section and you expand upon it. So that's what he's doing. You go into different keys, you modulate, you do different things. And that's why we've already had C minor in this section. And now we went back to C major via G major chord. Now we're going into this beautiful D minor, the statement of the theme in D minor. And this is what's happening. In groups of 4, I would do it. Groups of 4 and I make a diminuendo too. This is the most. Back to this. Now we're going back to the dominant C major. This is a surprise. He's doing the dominant of F major, which would be the subdominant key of C major. It's a surprise. Coming back to F major. And then we're in. Bring us back to C major, but he's fooling around with that G major chord, embellishing the dominant, which is the primary dominant of C major, which brings us back to the second theme. Rolling forward, rolling forward. And here again I do more, less, least. Now you might have some pianists that go, no, you really can't do that because it should be one dynamic. But when you play artistically and you want to phrase beautifully, you never have a flat dynamic with any given dynamic that's given. You always got the ins and outs and the sculpting, cajoling of your lines. You want to get that vocal model. If you have the vocal model, you know a vocalist can't sing robotically this line. Their voice is lilting. So you want the lilt of this line in 4s, groups of 4, that the 4s are rolling from each other into the next, to the next, to the next. Answer that. You can see I didn't do that as a flat dynamic either. Go in and out. That's the way you play beautifully. Is you have clay in your hands and you're sculpting along the way. Now this piece goes much faster than I'm showing you. You should practice slow motion. You should do separate hands and all of those steps that a pianist should take, and block out that left hand when it has Alberti basses or broken chords, so that you hear ultimately where the resolutions are of the chords. Know the keys of the piece. Like, you know, when it went to C minor, that's a more emotionally effective, the depth of the emotion of C minor. Know that going from C minor chord to its sixth chord is an emotional shift. And then you can go back in the keys. Resolve. I hope these ideas are, you know, and some of these views where you can see the way the wrist rolls around and how we create beautiful, shaped, well-shaped phrases.